Hello, students, my old friends. We're on mission 6, lesson 4, where our student objective is to use meters to model the decomposition of one whole into hundredths and represent and count hundredths. What this means essentially is we've been looking at tenths before, but now in decimal form, we want to look at hundredths. So let's take a look at hundredths. It's just more fun to say, I think, hundredths. Let's do it. 8/10. We, at this point, should be able to convert 8/10 into a decimal form. If I wanted to rewrite 8/10 in decimal form, what would that look like? Well, I'm going to ask myself, how many whole numbers do I have? I have 0 whole numbers in front of here, so I have 0 whole numbers. And then I'm going to put my decimal. And then 8/10, because this is the tenths place. That first spot after the decimal is the tenths place. Tenths. So today, the change is we're just going to look at the hundredths place. So now we have 8 hundredths. And we want to figure out, okay, how can we write 8 hundredths? Well, I'm still going to ask myself here. Okay, how many whole numbers do I have? Well, I still have 0 whole numbers. And then how many tenths do I have? Well, I have 0 tenths here in the tenths place. I have 0 tenths. However, my next spot, when I write a decimal, my next spot over is for hundredths. So how many hundredths do I have? I have 8 hundredths. And it would look like this. So, again, with decimals, the first spot after the decimal is tenths. The second spot after the decimal is hundredths. Hundredths. Like such. So I didn't have any tenths here. I just had 8 hundredths. And so I had to put a 0 in the tenth spot and then an 8 in the hundredth spot. So the difference, if you look up here, 8/10, well, the 8 was in the 10th spot, which is right after the decimal. Now this is 8 hundredths. So there's a 0 in the 10th spot and then an 8 in the hundredth spot. Now, knowing what we know about fractions, which is greater, 8/10 or 8 hundredths? That is correct. 8/10 is greater than 8 hundredths because the pieces are smaller in tenths, or excuse me, the pieces are smaller in hundredths and the pieces are bigger in tenths. So you'd rather have 8 big pieces than 8 of these little pieces. Same holds true with decimals, right? 8/10 is still greater than 8 hundredths. Because here there's 0 in the 10th spot. Here there's 8 in the 10th spot. Where it might get a little tricky is if we said, okay, we have 26 hundredths. And we want to rewrite that as a decimal. Now, I still know how many whole numbers do I have? I still have 0 whole numbers. And so this is where my decimal starts. Now, what I'm going to do is think about if I had 26 hundredths, how many tenths and how many hundredths do I have? Well, I'm going to look here. 20, I have 2 tenths, actually, because, again, I have 20 hundredths here out of this, and then I have 6 hundredths left over, right? So I have 2 tenths and 6 hundredths left over. How do I write that then? Well, in the 10th spot, I have 2, and in the 100th spot, I have 6. 26 hundredths. Looks just like that. Looks just like that. So if I had, let's say it was 84 hundredths, I'm going to rewrite that as I have 0 holes. 84 hundredths, like such. So we're just expanding beyond the tenths now into the realm of hundredths and looking at how that affects our decimals compared to fractions, etc. Enjoy hundredths, and it's going to be a heck of a good time.